Good morning. I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year. It is 9:01 a.m. on Wednesday, January 14th, 2015, and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board is now called to order. Mr. Tejas, are there any public comments?
No comments.
Moving on to item 3, the adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of November 12th, 2014. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Move to approve.
There's a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The minutes for the meeting of November 12th, 2014 are approved. Item 4, presentation, discussion, and action on a board resolution selecting a financial advisor pursuant to the CRRMA's request for proposals issued on October 29th, 2014, and authorizing the executive director to negotiate an agreement with such selected firm. Mr. Tejas.
Good morning. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So before us today is this first item is the procurement results for the request for proposals that was issued for financial advisor services. What I thought I would do is go through some background for the benefit of the public and, of course, as a reminder to the board in terms of the role of the financial advisor, the procurement process and timelines that we used, the submittals received, evaluation committee that was used to score, the actual scoring criteria that was approved by the board, final scores, and of course the recommendation and request for board action today. So as always, please feel free to stop me as I'm going through this. So just generally speaking, the role of a financial advisor is to provide financial advisory services to the RMA on an ongoing basis. So types of services that we've received in the past include developing proposed debt issuances. That includes the RMA's past SIB loans and bond issuances and that sort of thing. Ongoing disclosure and other reporting requirements is also a big item. And of course, review and develop recommendations on proposed bond refinancing opportunities and other debt management issues. Really anything related to our debt issuances we'll be talking to the financial advisors about. So this is the procurement process and timeline that we've utilized for this selection. In October, we issued the request for proposals. By November 12th, we had the Q&A process completed with answers posted online. By November 26th, we had received 3 submittals, and that was the due date. January 7th, we had the evaluation committee meeting, and we'll talk a little bit about that group here in a second. By January 14th, which is today, we're asking for the selection of a GEC. That's incorrect. That's supposed to be a financial advisor. You can see where I used as a template for this. We're asking for the selection of a financial advisor today, and then we're also asking for approval of, actually, today we're also asking not only for you to select a GEC, but also to authorize me to negotiate an agreement and come back to you at the February board meeting for an agreement to be approved. That's the plan. So 3 financial advisor submittals were received, one from Estrada Hinojosa and Company, and I've listed the prime contacts. You'll recognize some of these names. Estrada Hinojosa and Company submitted, First Southwest, and PFN Group as well. Those were the 3 submittals received. This is the scoring criteria that was approved by the board. You asked for experience and qualifications to count as 30%, scope of services as 30%, cost of services 15%, depth and scope of resources as 15%, and lastly, references as 10%. So the evaluation committee consists of 3 individuals. Esperanza Garcia, who is the budget analyst for the RMA and sitting over here to my left. She works for the City of El Paso. Denise Grizzle, who is the comptroller of the City of El Paso, and Wallace Hargrove, who's a deputy county auditor for El Paso County. They all served, and I want to thank them publicly for their service. It's very helpful. These are the results. I've masked the evaluator scores themselves, but as you'll see, the highest scoring firm was First Southwest. Second firm was Estrada Hinojosa, and third was PFM Group. And this group, I need to explain the scoring on this one. If we go back to the scoring criteria, unfortunately, PFM Group left out the cost of services component to this submittal. So they immediately off the top, they lost 15 points. Beyond that, they also ran longer than the maximum pages allowed in this procurement. So we had to deduct some additional points for that one as well. So unfortunately, they their number reflects that. So that's the final scoring. The recommendation requested board action. So the recommendation from the evaluation committee was a unanimous recommendation that the First Southwest Company be selected as a financial advisor to the Camino Real RMA. So the requested board action then is really two actions that we're asking for. We're asking first for a motion to select First Southwest as the financial advisor to the RMA, and secondly, authorize the executive director to begin negotiations with First Southwest. That would be a financial advisor agreement. I would come back to you with the proposed agreement, hopefully in February, and ask for approval to execute that agreement. This financial advisor agreement would be for a 3-year term with 2 one-year options. And I think, subject to your questions, that's all I have for you.
Any questions for Mr. Tejas on the process or how the selection committee worked, or any questions in regards to the final selection?
Do we need to have 2 motions on this, Mr. Chair?
I believe we need to.
We can
do
take
one
them
motion?
together, absolutely.
Okay. So with that said, are there any questions before I ask for the motion in regards to the process or the selection committee or what was entailed? I think Mr. Tejas did a very good job of kind of going through all the items. So it's a 2-part motion. The first motion is to select First Southwest as the CRRMA's financial advisor. And the second part of the motion is to authorize the executive director to begin negotiations with First Southwest agreement to negotiate a 3-year term with 2 possible extensions of 1 year each, which would then be bought back upon being finalized, prior to being finalized for board approval.
Move to approve.
There's a motion.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations to Mr. Placide and First Southwest. Thank you for your work over the years, and we look forward to continuing to work with you over the next 3 years. Mr. Tejas, thank you as well, and as well as the selection scoring committee. We appreciate all their efforts.
Yes, sir. I do. Thank you.
Mr. Tejas, you might as well stay up there because we're moving right on to the next item that also has a lot of interest today. Item 5, presentation, discussion, and action on a board resolution selecting a general engineering consultant pursuant to the CRRMA's request for qualifications issued on November 10th, 2014, and authorizing the executive director to negotiate an agreement with such selected firm. Mr. Tejas?
Thank you. So we're going to follow essentially the same format as you saw. I used this as the template for the financial advisor, so this will look very familiar to you. And that's not it. This does not look familiar to you. There it is.
Mr. Tejas, if we can hold on just 1 second. If we get one of the gentlemen from IT out to help Ms. Fennenbach with her terminal, I believe she's having an issue pulling up the presentation.
So am I.
Okay.
Yeah, because if I pull up the agenda, I don't get the attachments. Where?
On those?
Not that one, no, on the number 5. Well, I've got it here, but
Can you try it out? You already see the stream.
see how it says that I have.
That's all I've got yesterday. I was trying to download it.
I want to get to there, but I can't.
You can,
Oh, you
close
want to
this.
watch that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is what's going to be on the board.
Okay, I'll just look at it. That's fine.
You can close out.
It's on your taskbar. Click on
You
the
can
take over.
minimize this.
Minimize.
Minimize it.
Okay, all right, thank
You
you.
can just expand it.
I already went through that drill.
I don't want to be squinting for the public.
We're looking for the homepage, but also we're looking for the stream. See, he's got some info pulled up. We don't have it. Some of the agenda. Okay, so I did
There we
it.
go.
And then the agenda. Oh, let's see. Sure. Thank you.
We just want to add a little more drama to the GEC selection process, so
I'm sure they appreciate that.
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for your help.
Thanks.
Is everyone good to go?
Okay,
Mr. Tejas,
so let's get started.
let's get started.
So this is the GEC procurement. We'll do the same thing. We'll talk about the role, the procurement process and timeline, submittals received, scoring criteria, the technical review committee used on this one, and the recommendation and request for board action. So in very general terms, the role of general engineering consultant is really to serve almost as the engineering staff to the RMA, but can also provide various other staffing services as needed. So these are a list of sample services that have been provided to the RMA from the current GEC, which include planning services, design services, project management, project oversight, and project operations. So they really serve a much larger role than really the in-house engineering department, but this gives you a feel for what we're looking for. So the process and timeline for this one goes as follows. In November 10th, we issued the RFQ. By December 1, the Q&A process had been completed, with answers being posted online to those questions. By December 8th, then we received 2 submittals. By January 8th, then the Technical Review Committee held their meeting, which again we'll talk about here in a second. January 14th, which is today, we're asking for the board to select the GEC, and similar to the FA procurement, we're also asking that the board authorize the executive director to begin negotiating an agreement. That agreement would then come back to you all again for approval prior to execution. And we're hoping to do that in February. So 2 submittals were received, the Camino Real Regional Mobility Partners, and those are the folks essentially that serve as the GEC for us today, and you'll see the listing of the prime, which is Atkins, and the subs, which include Jacobs, ECM, AIA, Moreno Cardenas, Brock and Bustillos, Fagan, CQC, and Lopez Marketing. HNTB was the second submittal. HNTB is the prime, Barracuda PR, Cambridge Systematic, CQC, Flores, Media Consulting, Frank X. Spencer and Associates, Global Security and Intelligence, King Advising, Quantum Engineering, Paragon Project Resources, Prime Strategies, Site Southwest, and Stell Environmental round out their GEC proposed team. This is the scoring criteria that was approved by the board when we issued the request for qualifications. Experience of the firm amounted to 25%, approach to services was 35%, and staffing was 40%. I should mention that not only this PowerPoint, but the PowerPoint for the financial advisor will be posted online as soon as this meeting ends for the benefit of the public. Technical Review Committee was used to evaluate the statements of qualification, the submissions provided by each of the proposed GEC teams. Fernando Hernandez, who is the county engineer for El Paso County, served on this one. David Plutowski, who's the RMA coordinator from TxDOT out of Austin, served on the committee, as did Irene Ramirez, who's the interim city engineer for the city of El Paso. I would mention all 3 professional engineers. This was a qualifications-based submission, so I felt it was important that we have professional engineers sit on this selection committee. So this one was a little bit unique in that we built into the procurement the ability to have oral presentations to the board if the technical review committee felt it necessary. In such event, then what would happen is the technical review committee would provide a recommendation to you all saying they were too close or this or that or some other issue happened, and they would request oral presentations to the board. In such event, the technical review committee scoring would then consist of 75% of the total score, and you all would score the oral presentations 25%. Combine that, and that's how you would have your final score. In this case, a presentation to the board was not requested by the technical review committee. In fact, it was a unanimous recommendation from the committee. So these are the scores. The Camino Real Mobility Partners had a higher score of 93.66, and HNTB had a score of 91.66. And again, I've masked the evaluators' names. So recommendation and requested board action is the same as under the financial advisor procurement. Technical Review Committee had a unanimous recommendation that the Camino Real Mobility Partners be selected as a general engineering consultant to the RMA. So I'm requesting 2 actions again. Motion to select Camino Real Mobility Partners as the GEC, and secondly, to authorize the executive director to begin negotiations with the Camino Real Mobility Partners. This agreement, because of the nature of it, would actually be a 5-year base term with 2 one-year options. So subject to your questions, I believe that's all I have for you on this one as well.
Any question from the board on the process, the scoring, or the RFQ itself? If not, is there a motion to select the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority partners as the general engineering consultant to the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority, and authorize the executive director to begin negotiations with the Camino Real Regional Mobility partners for a 5-year term with 2 possible extensions of 1 year each that would be brought back to the board for approval?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Congratulations to the Camino Real Regional Mobility Partners. I'd also like to thank HNTB for their work. Both are extremely fine firms, and we've worked with each a little bit in different capacities and got to know the individuals. And again, I'm very thankful for the amount of work and time to put these proposals forward. And I'd also like to thank those folks that served as part of the technical review committee, both the city, the county, as well as the RMA coordinator at TxDOT in Austin. Moving on, item number 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a 6-month extension of the agreement with the CRRMA's current general engineering consultant through June 30th, 2015, to permit the completion of the ongoing procurement process for a general engineering consultant. Mr. Tejas?
So this item is actually an item that's required because of the fact that the current GEC underlying agreement actually expires January 16th. So what we're doing here is really extending for a 6-month period, which will allow us to complete the procurement process that we just heard about under the prior item. This allows all of the existing work authorizations to continue as well. So what you say, and in fact, actually, I need to make a correction. In the caption of the agenda, I noted that it is through June 30th of 2015, but in fact, it's actually through July 16th of 2015, which allows for the full 6-month period. So I apologize for that, but with that correction, I'd ask for approval, or recommend approval, rather.
Any questions on item 6? The new date again for item 6 was
July 16th,
July
2015.
16th. So is there a motion to authorize the executive director to execute a 6-month extension of the agreement with the CRRMA's current general engineering consultant through July 16th, 2015?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 6 is approved. Item 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 15.2 with Atkins North America, Inc. as a CRRMA general engineering consultant in order to clarify the scope of the work for work authorization number 15 and number 15.1 as they relate to the I-10 at Loop 375, America's Interchange Project. Mr. Tejas?
So this item actually is a cleanup item. When you go back in time, you'll recall that the Americas Interchange project itself was originally the 3 direct connectors that was developed as a design-build project. After that, the Texas Department of Transportation then requested the RMA to begin developing design work for initially one additional direct connector after the initial 3. Then they added a couple more, and then eventually they added the entire remaining scope from what was referred to as the ultimate schematic. So that's how the RMA has actually designed the remaining work for the Americas Interchange. And the way that we actually do this is, as you'll recall, with our general engineering consultant, we have an underlying agreement, and from there, each time that we have an individual task, we issue individual work authorizations. So when you look at the work authorizations that we've executed with our general engineering consultant, specifically work authorizations number 12, 15, and 15.1, those individually, or I should say collectively, actually is how we designed the remaining work for the Americas Interchange. So the last one, which was 15.1, was intended to cover all of the remaining work necessary to achieve the ultimate schematic, specifically the I-10 main lanes work as well. But somehow, through some mishap, we actually included language in 15.1 that excluded the I-10 main lanes work. So what we're doing here under item number 7 is actually clarifying that the I-10 main lane work can be accomplished under work authorization 15.1. That's in essence what we're doing. So we're not adding additional compensation that was already included. The project development agreements that we've executed with TxDOT anticipated this work. So really, it ultimately is more of a cleanup item than anything else.
So to be clear, the funding was already set in item 15.1. There's no additional cost. All we're doing is allowing that additional work to be included as part of that funding that was in 15.1. Is that correct, Mr. Tejas?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Is there any questions in regards to item 7? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Make that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is that correct? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 7 is approved. Item 8, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing executive director to execute work authorization number 20.1 with Atkins North America, Inc. as a CRRMA's general engineering consultant for the provision of various toll operation services for Loop 375 Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes.
So this item number 8 is actually somewhat related to item number 6, whereby the RMA has extended the underlying general engineering consultant agreement to allow for this period while we negotiate the new agreement. Item number 8 refers to the toll operations services that the general engineering consultant provides to the RMA, and that includes everything from monitoring the payments from MSB to monitoring the signs and correcting any issues that come up, basically operation services for Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes. So what we've done to date is enter into an operations agreement through a work authorization with the general engineering consultant to handle 1 calendar year of services. So that ended in December for Chavez. So what you're seeing here before you as number 8 is an extension for 6 months, which will actually mirror the extension of the GEC's underlying agreement. And as I should have mentioned under item 6, once we enter into a new agreement with the general engineering consultant, then we will reevaluate all of the existing work authorizations and determine whether we close them out under the original agreement or we move them under the new terms of the new agreement. So that will happen with this item as well. But what makes item number 8 unique as opposed to the rest of the work authorizations is that the original work authorization number 20, which was the toll operation services in calendar year 2014, actually expired at the end of December. So we have to enter into this new one for calendar year 2015.
It's also important to note that all of these work authorizations are not to exceed amounts. So we know the absolute max amount, but they could also be less as they are billed basically on a work completed basis. The amount of this work authorization number 8, Mr. Tejas, is...
One moment, please. I'll tell you that right now. This one is $244,278. And to arrive at that amount, actually what we did is we took last year's amount, cut it in half for the 6-month period, and then added a component for the website development for our website. So it's an additional task that we've added, and a 3% increase, excuse me, for this new year.
So again, it's a not to exceed amount. Depending on what's billed, that's what will be paid. Any questions in regards to item 8? If not, is there a motion to approve item 8?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 8 is approved. Item 9, discussion and action on a board resolution establishing scoring criteria and authorizing the issuance of a RFQ, request for qualifications for the El Paso streetcar project, including a brief update on project progress. Mr. Tejas.
Okay, so for this item, we've got another PowerPoint that I'll be sharing with you. What I intend to do here is really, as noted in the title, update you on the project itself, a very brief status, and then we'll talk about the procurement process that we are proposing for this particular project. We'll talk about the timelines, and then I'll actually ask for scoring for the board to approve scoring criteria for the infrastructure component, and I'll explain that here in a second. And then lastly, of course, ask for board action. So here's the major project activities that have been completed to date. So in August, the URS agreement was assigned to the Camino Real RMA. And for the benefit of the public, I should mention this project began under the City of El Paso through an agreement between the city and URS. That agreement was assigned to the RMA with the intent that the RMA be tasked with completing the procurement of the project and actually through construction. Once it's actually up and running, we will transfer it back to the City of El Paso to be operated by the City of El Paso's Mass Transit Department, which is Sun Metro. So that's the intent of this project. So again, URS agreement was actually assigned to the RMA in August with additional funds, a little over $240,000, that allowed us to continue work, which we referred to as the interim scope. So that began in August. By October, we had actually issued a request for information. And what we did there was we took all of the documents that had been developed by URS and the City of El Paso to date, we put them online and sent out notices to all the interested folks in the industry, letting them know that our documents were online and we wanted to extend the invitation to come and meet with us and tell us what they liked about the proposed procurement, what they didn't, and most importantly, what items we could change that could save either the project money or just make more sense from a procurement standpoint from the industry side. So the request for information was issued in October. By October 22nd, we had executed the funding agreement with TxDOT, and the full procurement scope with URS then began on that date as well. November 6th, we had the RFI, the request for information question and answer period was completed. We actually had received some questions. We provided those answers on November 6th. By November 10th, 11th, and 12th, we actually had 3 days where we met with, if I remember correctly, we actually met with 6 different groups. We had meeting requests by 8 different groups, and those groups consisted of either individual firms that were interested in the project or already pairings of perhaps joint ventures or partnerships that were also interested in pursuing this project. So we met with 6 folks. We actually got 8 inquiries about meeting, and we ended up meeting with 6. Very well attended, and we got a lot of really good feedback from the industry as well. So by November 21, the grant funds from TxDOT, the $97 million, were deposited into the project account, and December 30th is when we actually issued the final results of the RFI. And what we did there was we posted online, and we had made this commitment in the Industry Day review meetings. We actually committed that we would, any of the major changes to the proposed procurement that we had originally posted in the RFI, we posted online on December 30th saying these are the main areas that will change. So we're trying to be as open, as transparent as possible. We're trying to get lots of industry feedback so we can make this thing work. So that's what we've done to date. I should mention, we have discussed in the past this project. The idea was to issue a single procurement that would include infrastructure components, which has everything from laying the track to developing and installing the power stations, the maintenance and storage facility. Everything related to the infrastructure side of the project would be one component of the original procurement. The second component was then the vehicles themselves, and that is the refurbishment of the city's PCC cars. Originally, we put that out, and in fact, in the RFI that was issued, we put that out as a proposed single procurement. So we were requiring contractors to get with vehicle rehab folks and come together as a single team. The one unanimous comment that we heard at the RFI was, "Don't do that." So we're not doing that. So what we're proposing now is the splitting of the infrastructure procurement and the vehicle procurement into 2 distinct procurements. So the infrastructure procurement will include a request for qualifications first, very similar to the GEC procurement that we just talked about, where we're making sure that the firms that are submitting are qualified to handle this type of work and this size of project. If they are deemed qualified at that point, then they would roll into the RFP component of the procurement. The second type of procurement then is, of course, the vehicle procurement, and that will only include a request for proposal. So the RMA board itself will identify the selection criteria and scoring for each procurement. And just for the benefit of the board and the members of the public that are interested as well, the RMA has a longstanding direction to staff that each procurement that goes out, the board wants to approve the scoring criteria prior to the issuance of that procurement. So we bring that to you each time. And that's, in fact, what you'll see on a slide here before too long. So each procurement will include an evaluation committee to develop a recommendation for board consideration, very similar to what we've done with the financial advisor and GEC. And ultimately, the board will select the infrastructure and vehicle contractors. just like we've done with the GEC and FA. Here's the proposed timeline for the vehicle procurement. We're looking in February to issue the RFP itself. By April, we're looking for proposals to be returned to the RMA. By May, we're looking at the board selecting a vehicle contractor. By mid-2017, the contractor should begin delivery of completed vehicles. Early to mid of 2018, we'll have all vehicles on site. And I should mention, just so we're clear on that, the contractor, as proposed here, and as I understand to be industry standard, the vehicle contractor will actually issue an initial vehicle, and that will be brought, and we'll make sure that that's up to spec and it matches everything that we had requested. Once that's done, they've got a green light, they know what they're doing, and then they really speed up on the remaining vehicles. So that's the intent of the first vehicle coming and then the rest coming later. So early to mid 2018, all the vehicles should be on site, and by mid to late 2018, the testing, acceptance, and startup should be complete for this particular project. So by late 2018, the streetcars should be running. Now, I should mention we have URS here as well, so if I misspeak, please come up and correct me.
Mr. Tejas, I think it's important also to note that the qualifications for the RFQ were developed by URS. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and we'll get to those right after this timeline, I believe. So here's the proposed timeline for the infrastructure procurement, and this again includes everything from the maintenance and storage facility to the tracks to the power stations to the lines overhead. Everything included that is not included in the vehicle is included in this procurement. In January, we intend to issue the RFQ based on the criteria that hopefully you will approve here shortly. In February, the proposals will be due to the RMA. The RMA then in March would identify the contractor shortlist, and the RFP would then be issued in April. With May, the proposals would be due to the RMA, and June, the board would select the infrastructure contractor. Mid to late 2016, the maintenance facility is substantially complete. Mid to late 2017, the rail and guideway is substantially complete. This is, I should mention, not only with the infrastructure, but also the vehicle procurements, the timelines are actually very aggressive, but we believe that we can hit these dates.
Just a quick, Raymond, there's a
Yes.
year then before, after the infrastructure is completed, before the cars are available. You're saying late 2018?
When all of the vehicles are available, yes.
And
And remember too,
infrastructure.
once we get the vehicles here, there's a long testing period per vehicle that has to occur. So that's all built in here as well.
So that's the year between the infrastructure being completed and then when the cars are now?
Correct. As I understand it, the intent is to have a short bit of track up and running when the first vehicle comes so that we can get it out there and start running it a bit. But there's a longer track that would be necessary to actually do all of the testing and commissioning required to actually have an operating system. So it's all built into that timeline.
Okay, thank you.
And again, URS will correct me if I misspeak. So here's, as I mentioned, the first component of the two distinct procurements that will go out is the infrastructure RFQ, that first step, that qualifications-based process within the infrastructure. What we're looking at doing here, and this is the component that I'm asking for action on from the board, is we'll have a pass-fail component and then an actual scored component, which could in the end result to a short list of potential infrastructure contractors that would then receive the RFP. Each of these steps, of course, will come back to the board for individual approvals. But at this point, I'm asking for approval of the scoring criteria. So the first part, of course, has to be financial qualifications. Does the team or the individual firm that's proposing, that wants to do the project, do they have the financial wherewithal to handle this size and type of project? So that, in essence, is a pass-fail component. If they don't pass the financial qualifications component, then they don't move on to the scoring part. The scoring part will consist of two areas. The first is experience of firm and or team, which will consist of 35%. That includes everything from experience with similar projects to testing, commissioning of a new service, safety program, stakeholder coordination, minority and small business participation. Very similar to the things that you normally see in a procurement. Now this one's a little bit unique. This is 65% would go to the key personnel background and experience of the team proposing. And again, this is just for the RFQ, the qualifications part, so that's why you're seeing this level of detail. You're looking at the individuals that are going to be in the field, have they done this before, and what is their experience in this. So you see all the different leads and managers, supervisors that are that are going to be required for this project, everything from principal in charge, project manager, field superintendent, document control, traffic control, testing, and integration. So all of those individuals would, the team that they propose would be scored according to the 65%. So what you see then is 35% for experience of the firm and or team collectively, and then the individual team members then are individually scored as well, again, with the intent that we get to a short list. We're hoping that we'll have enough submissions in the RFQ that we'll actually have to shortlist. So what I'm asking of you today then is a motion to adopt the selection criteria and scoring enumerated within this presentation for the infrastructure procurement. Now I should mention again, as the chair noted earlier, these scoring criteria were initially developed by URS and were reviewed by myself and commented on by myself and our outside attorneys as well, who are developing the actual RFQ documents. So we've been working together as a team to make sure that it all works together. So again, motion to adopt the selection criteria and scoring, and then secondly, a motion to authorize the executive director to actually issue the RFQ and any associated documents and instruments as they relate to the infrastructure component of the streetcar project. So that's what I'm asking for today. And then very similar to this, you'll see likely in February, I'll be back with a very similar PowerPoint that would ask for similar action on the vehicle procurement as well. So this is the very first item, which is infrastructure RFQ.
Any questions for Mr. Tejas? I think it's also important to note that URS has basically worked on this city from the get-go, from the very first time that before the funding was even available. The city did all the work, did all the environmental, put everything together. URS did all that for the city. Then that, through an agreement with the city, that work was then handed over to us with URS then with some additional funds to complete the work and get the RFQ ready to go. And they also provide all the scoring criteria. Mr. Berry, can I ask you a quick question? Chuck Berry with URS.
For the record, my name is Chuck Berry. I represent URS Corporation, and I am the project manager on the El Paso streetcar project for the RMA. Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning, and thank you, Chuck, for coming today. Just a little unique in terms of 65% for personnel is, how was that decided? I mean, you've got 35% firm, 65% personnel. Is that, this is a really unique project, so it's hard to compare projects, but I just wanted to understand how that was put together.
And we anticipated that could be a question because we deliberated on that for a while ourselves in bringing a recommendation to your executive director, Raymond. One of the components that you typically see would be understanding of the project and approach on the work to be performed. That was considered initially to be included in this RFQ, but really the purpose of the request for qualifications is to determine the baseline for which firms would meet the minimum criteria for providing the work that you're proposing to perform for the city of El Paso. After some discussion, we thought that was better placed in the RFP. We could get a lot more details in the request for proposals, and we would not duplicate the information that would be provided to the RMA in the RFQ process and the RFP. So automatically that reduced one of the normal 3 sets of criteria that you normally see. The next level that brought us to the basically 2-to-1 ratio for personnel versus the firm is that you probably want a firm that's going to provide you, or a company, a contractor that's going to provide you the A-team personnel, and second to that, the backup of from the company. It would be possible for scoring to turn out very highly for a firm that had a very strong reputation, and yet they were proposing their B team to the RMA. We're really looking for an A-team proposal. This is the first time that the community will pursue this type of work in our history. Although there were streetcar, about 70 miles total of streetcar in El Paso at its peak, it was all done under private contract at that time. when the transit service took over the private services, they had all been implemented privately. So you really want someone that's coming in with a lot of experience, has done this before. I think it's been quoted to me from several sources and inside to the team that you want someone on your team who's succeeded at this before and not necessarily taking this on for the first time. That's key to the personnel, probably about a 2-to-1 ratio.
That makes a lot of sense. I can certainly understand that approach. Have you seen a lot of interest? I've heard anecdotally that there's been a lot of interest, but are you getting a lot of interest and a
Yes,
lot
sir.
of questions?
Yes, we have been receiving a good amount of interest, and from really strong teams and firms and that have done this type of work before. As your executive director commented to you, the industry review was very enlightening and very it allowed your team through URS to mimic some of the better properties of a construction manager at risk without the need to do that process. One of the things that we thought was very important is to get some construction manager input, and we used the industry review to secure that information. So we were really pleased with that, and that was probably a key, I don't want to call it a turning point, a key milestone along the development of the project to make sure that we're putting together the best information to get you guys the best project.
Any questions for Mr. Berry? Mr. Berry, thank you for enlightening us on that, and it sounds like a great approach. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Mr. Tejas, any other information that you need to provide?
That's all I have, other than request the actions.
Is there any question for Mr. Tejas before I ask for the motion? If not, is there a motion to adopt the selection criteria and scoring enumerated within the presentation for the infrastructure procurement component of the El Paso streetcar project? Should we do this in two motions, Mr. Tejas?
Together would be fine.
As well as
Please.
a motion to authorize the executive director to issue the request for qualifications and associated documents and instruments as they relate to the infrastructure component of the El Paso streetcar project.
So moved.
We have a motion? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you, Mr. Tejas, for all of your work on this. As I understand, the actual streetcars themselves, procurement will be coming out next month. Is that correct?
No, I just closed it. One second.
I think that's what we discussed. We had talked, I wanted to make sure that we were still on track. We had looked at, City Council has directed that we use the old PCC or the presidential citation cars. Is that correct? That's the direction we're getting from City Council. But just as part of our, just to be cautious, we're also looking at including replica cars as part of that RF. Are we looking at putting replica cars in, Mr. Tejas?
No, sir. No. So we looked at it initially as part of the due diligence. We looked at the PCC cars versus replica and trying to figure out if we should do both, how we should do that. In the end, after consultation with the city and with TxDOT, we've all agreed that we would go forward with the PCC car procurement only.
Would it be difficult to put the replica, to have replicas quoted as an option, just in case the PCC cars came in above cost? Because we have a fixed amount of dollars and there's not going to be a penny more.
Right. So it would add time and cost to develop that. We would essentially have to replicate the procurement process that we've developed for the PCC vehicles, which is in effect complete and ready to be issued in February. We'd have to replicate all of that. And I say replicate all the work. There's some of it's boilerplate, some of it we could transfer over, but there is a good deal of work that we would have to pay for from URS to go down that path.
Do we have a high degree of confidence that we're going to be able to bring these PCC cars in with the budgetary numbers that we're looking for to be able to complete this project?
Yes, we do. The only question is how many, whether or not we'll be able to get all 9 or some number just shy of 9. Now, either way, Sun Metro is comfortable with the approach. They've agreed with the approach, and in the end, they're the ones that are going to be running the program. So if they're comfortable with fewer than 9, then we've essentially said, okay, we'll do it. And as I mentioned, the city manager has been involved in these discussions, TxDOT folks as well.
All right. And that'll be in front of the board next month.
We believe so in February, yes, sir.
All right, I don't believe I'll be at next month's board meeting, so I'm just kind of giving you that as a heads up so that you're aware and you can look at that. Thank you, Mr. Tejas.
Yes, sir.
I believe item 9 is complete. Item 10, presentation, discussion, and action on the Cesar Chavez Express Toll Lane Performance Report for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2014. Mr. Tejas?
So on this item, I'm just going to introduce Clayton Howe, who is a member of our general engineering consultant team, and you'll remember him. He comes up here and provides our quarterly reports. This is the most recent quarterly report for Chavez.
Good morning. Clayton Howe for the record from Atkins Global, part of your GEC team. Today we'll be talking about the quarterly report for the Cesar Chavez Managed Lane. And just as a reminder, Managed Lane is really a congestion relief tool for a corridor. We need to keep that in mind as we look at some of the performance numbers. One of the graphs that really drives this point home is if you look at the number of transactions that we see per working day, you'll see that in the non-school off time, we're getting a pretty consistent growth pattern in the number of transactions from our commuters. And then you'll see the dips every time we have holidays and schools are closed. You'll see there through the summer, and then we'll see another dip in November and in December. On our total transactions, we saw the largest number of transactions so far in the month of October. It was a full month and several working days, and we've seen a nice pitch of growth since the school districts went back into session since the summer months. Although then you see a dip in November, and we will continue to see a dip in December as well. We anticipate the first quarter of 2015 to see a nice continual growth as those people that are using that corridor become more and more reliant upon the congestion relief of the managed lane.
This graph is just a bit confusing, and we've talked about this in previous board meetings, but there's no seasonality built into this graph, and there was no seasonality built into the traffic and revenue study. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what we're seeing is actual use. So when you're looking at on an individual month, it can be a little confusing. I think as we get a full year's history behind us and we can start comparing years, then I think you'll start to see the different trends without looking at specific months.
Yeah, Mr. McLaughlin, you're exactly right. In fact, the plan at the beginning of this year was to do a 12-month look at it, and once we had history, then reevaluate whether we wanted to look at prior history, the prior month from the previous year versus the actuals, rather than using a forecast that was done that was really developed for an annual look at it, at the performance. So those discussions will be planned and implemented in the first quarter of this year, so that all of our performance metrics for 2015 will then follow a different style as the board directs.
So if we look at individual months, I don't think you're really getting a true overall picture. I think you need to look at quarters and then soon years, and that'll give us the idea of how we're doing against forecast.
I think if you can look past some of the clutter and look at the trend lines, you can see that we're positively growing. People are gradually accepting the use of these, and at a pretty normal pace for a brand new road in an area that hasn't seen tolling before.
Is the data not available for December? Is that why it's not on your graph?
Yes, ma'am. Typically, there is a lag coming back from the technology. You know, we want to verify all of the numbers that come in, and since the board meetings, we like to run at least 1 month behind that, just to make sure that we've done all of our QA, QC on the numbers.
So I assume in the next report we'll get the annual view as opposed to the monthly. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Chair?
I believe we are looking at this quarterly. So at the end of the probably April, with the next report, you'll get an annual view as well as probably the first 2-3 months of the year, and you'll start to see more of an idea. You know, the seasonality really is kind of a big deal when you see the big dip we have in the summer months versus the higher than forecast. We want to be looking at longer periods.
I would mention also that the reports are actually quarterly reports following our fiscal year, so that's why you're seeing the breakouts as they are. So September, October, November was quarter one for our fiscal year 15.
I will tell you that we have looked at the November numbers, and they're following the same trend lines so far.
You meant December, correct?
December, yes, sir. AVI transactions, again, on the left is the actual transactions. On the right was the forecasted at the TNR study. You'll see that we're still producing lower than what was projected, but if you eliminated the forecast and really looked at the way that your customers are using your road, you're seeing an increase in them choosing to use the AVI. And I think as those traffic patterns and as the congestion builds along those areas, people will be driven more to an AVI solution. Right now, there's so many inconsistent users that it doesn't make sense for them to open an account and to have $20 sitting over there just in case they might use it. And we'll see a little bit of an offset when we look at the pay-by-mail transactions. You'll see the growth pattern in those as well. They far exceed what was projected. They're making up the difference between those folks using the AVI or the toll tag. So when we compare the total transactions by what type they are, again, we're looking at AVI penetration. And since the summer months, we've seen a lot of new users coming on, as you would expect, in the fall. And so our percentage is going to drop down as those people get used to using the facilities and it becomes a normal part of their pattern. You'll see that AVI penetration creep back up, and we're seeing that in September and October. Total revenue, now we've added an extra bar on the graph. We've got not just the expected, which is how many transactions happened in the lanes, and what the value of those transactions were, whether they were an AVI transaction or they were a pay-by-mail transaction, the forecasted revenue, and then the actual deposit in the bank collected revenue. I think the most interesting thing here is that you're seeing a 2 to 3 month lag on the collections from when you see a peak in transactions. 2 to 3 months later, you'll see a peak in revenue. So your collection cycles are about, on average, the same as the other agencies in the state of Texas. We break those down into AVI revenue. We're seeing the same trends. Pay-by-mail revenue, this really highlights that lag. You'll see a peak, and then you'll see 2 months later that we'll see a peak in the actual collected revenue. This is a year-to-date snapshot to try to give you kind of an overall, as the chairman identified, how do you normalize this, the TNR that was actually looking at a full year. So we've got our first year, and if you add in the December numbers, we're trending about 10%, 11% below the anticipated or forecasted transactions for the first year, and we're about 3% above on our projected revenue versus our collected, which is outstanding because we still don't have that 2-month lag for the transactions to be paid that we would anticipate in our collection cycle.
The big difference, obviously, is the pay-by-mail. The toll rates are doubled from 10 cents to 20 cents. In addition, there's a pay-by-mail fee. So the fact that we've had higher pay-by-mail than anticipated is what has driven the revenue up.
That's absolutely correct.
But we continue to try to work to get folks to move to the AVI or toll tag concept, which on a standalone system, there may be folks that, just as Mr. Howell mentioned, don't want a toll tag. It's just easier for them to just pay as they go. But when we complete Border Highway West in the next 980 days or whatever the amount is, somewhere around that time, and we have more of a system, just in terms of having a complete system, folks are going to have a lot more interest in toll tags and utilizing toll tags because there'll be a number more opportunities to do so.
I completely agree, Mr. McLaughlin. What we've seen across the state of Texas is that's pretty much the trend. If you can add a value add, another reason to get that toll tag, a parking solution, some of the other integrations with some of other facilities, whether they're tolled or otherwise, then that really drives up your penetration rates. Typically, you'll see a mature agency will have in the mid to high 70s, low 80s, but the numbers you're seeing here are pretty consistent with a small startup organization.
We've also asked our team to send out applications to the top 100 pay-by-mail users, and just as a way to continue to let them know if you're going to use the facility more frequently, there's a more cost-effective way to do so. We had a rather low rate of return, somewhere around 6%. Is that correct?
That's correct, but that is a 50% increase over the other agency that attempted the same thing. So,
I was right, Mr. Howell?
You absolutely,
good
sir.
job.
It was a stroke of genius.
Never argue with the guy with the microphone. Good job. So,
yeah. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. If not, we'll look forward to working with you over the next couple of months to develop how you want this information displayed going forward and what information you'd like to receive.
Super. As we are going forward with our new web page, perhaps there's an ability to apply online through our web page directly, make an easier application process, more information. Certainly would like more information on the toll facilities themselves, as well as the streetcar project, and use it as more of make it a more useful, more informative, and kind of an active, engaged account going forward. So hopefully those are some ideas that can go forth in 2015. Any questions for Mr. Howell on Cesar Chavez?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any concerns with the data that you're seeing to date?
The only concern, Mr. Dominguez, is we are seeing the collection rates lower than we would anticipate. But if you keep in mind that you have a small percentage of habitual violators that are using your roads, and we've taken very little action against those to help motivate them to change their ways. Once we start implementing those programs, I believe we'll see that collection rate tick back up and be more in line with what we expected.
Thank you.
Just as one last side note, we didn't have any debt to build a facility, so rather unique in that particular cost. What we're paying for is the operation and maintenance of the facility. So we've got a lower hurdle than someone that's went out and built the facility and has the operation and maintenance. So those are advantages with this particular facility going forward. Thank you, Clayton.
You bet. Thank you.
Item 11, presentation, discussion, and action on a report from the CRRMA's General Engineering Consultant Team on its use of local resources. Mr. Tejas?
This is also one of the quarterly reports that we request of our general engineering consultant, and with us today we have Greg Blake, who will be presenting on this item. I'll ask IT to bring up that PowerPoint, please.
Thanks, Raymond. Greg Blake with the GEC. Let's see. Awkward pause. Thanks. So before you have the General Engineering Consultant Team utilization report on resources, and this is to cover the quarter ending through October 2014. I apologize for the format. I think Raymond and I talked about going forward. We're probably going to have to condense this a little bit so we can see what's going on. I think the most important information we can take a look at. Raymond, we can talk to some of the board members and figure out how we want to look at some of the historical data and then going forward with the new quarters. Otherwise, this chart's going to get a little too busy. But what you see here through October 2014, you can see that's quarter 23 on the bottom graph. There's a bit of a drop-off on total utilization of all the resources, local and non-local. And what's that is showing you is as we ramp down off the Americas, that last segment of the design we were working on through that prior quarter. Oh, wrong way. The firm summary here, what I tend to focus on is the bottom line. We're still hovering right around that 50% local versus non-local utilization. So subject to your questions.
Can you go through and for some of the newer board members define how you've broken out what constitutes local?
Right. So we have obviously several firms on the team, some that are headquartered outside of El Paso, some that are headquartered here in El Paso. So when we looked at defining what local resource meant versus non-local, it's folks that are residents here in El Paso, regardless of the firm and where that firm is headquartered. So you'll see with Atkins, we've utilized historically 40% of our employees have been working here in El Paso and living here in El Paso throughout the duration of the project. Same for AIA, Jacobs, and some of the other consultants that aren't headquartered here. They do have employees that have been residents here in El Paso while working on your program. So that's how it's defined.
Any questions for Mr. Blake on this process? They prepared this report based on our discretion a few years ago. We were looking to try to get more local firms actively engaged in some of the projects that we're involved in. Since that time, we've gone through and developed a pre-qualification list. So should there be, because in the past, projects tend to come forward fairly quickly. And we did make fairly quick decisions in terms of selection and procurements. And so now we've really got the GEC, now Mr. Blake's firm again, as well as the pre-qualified list. So we as well could be moving some of these projects, especially with the county mobility plan going forward with some local resources as well.
And that might be something we look at. Right now, the numbers you see in this presentation are just through your GEC contract. As you push forward with that 2013 CMP projects, you're going to have some firms that are direct contract outside the GEC. So it might be good to take a look at both, because that might affect what we show you here and see how that other program is working as far as bringing on locals. So it's another data set to look at.
Any questions for Mr. Blake? Greg, thank you, and congratulations to the Camino Real Reasonability Partners. And
thank you.
Item 12, update, discussion, and action on the Executive Director's Report. A, the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan, and B, procurement process for selection of an outside audit firm. Mr. Tejas?
So I'll be brief with these items. These are simply update items, and no action is requested or required on either of these. So with the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan, as you'll recall, that is a program that was developed by TxDOT, the El Paso County, and the Camino Real RMA. The intent there really was that each of the project program partners would then be responsible for different aspects of developing about $400 million worth of transportation projects. Specifically, within the 2013 CMP, the RMA and the county had agreed to different funding sources for various projects within the program. And included in there was the idea that the county would develop a transportation reinvestment zone, would pledge those revenues to the RMA. The RMA would then issue debt off of those revenues and would pursue certain projects through that route. And that was in the total amount of a little over $62 million. Well, as we've discussed in past board meetings, the Texas Attorney General issued an opinion that questioned the constitutionality of county transportation reinvestment zones. And as the legislature began yesterday, we've already seen a number of proposed legislative fixes to that issue. But of course, those are time consuming, and those won't be in place for quite some time. In fact, the ultimate fix would actually require a constitutional amendment and a vote of the people. So the fix for the transportation reinvestment zone issue won't be here anytime soon. So rather than sit around and wait for that legislative fix, the county has actually developed a different approach to plug that $62 million gap. And that's what I'm going to mention today. So they're looking at two different areas. To plug the $62 million, they're looking at coming back and asking the Regional Mobility Authority to issue additional debt off of the Vehicle Registration Fee Fund. So as you'll recall, we issued $72 million in debt off of the vehicle registration fees that the county currently imposes on vehicles registered in El Paso County. That amount actually left money on the table. So in other words, the revenues generated off of the vehicle registration fee covers the debt service required for the $72 million and has a remainder. That remainder is what the county is looking at for a second issuance of vehicle registration fees. So that could be potentially one bond issuance, additional bond issuance that we would be looking at in calendar 2015. So that would plug, according to the county's estimates. Now, we have not had our financial advisor or anyone look at it from our side, but they're anticipating somewhere between $35 and $40 million through that second bond issuance. The remainder then would come from county-generated revenues, and what they're in essence doing is they would the revenues generated off of the areas that originally encompassed the transportation reinvestment zone, they would pledge revenues off of those incremental increases to a state infrastructure bank loan that they would have directly with the state infrastructure bank, and they would pledge those revenues to us, and we would develop the remainder of the projects. What this does, it actually does a couple of things. The first and foremost, and most important, is that it actually gets us back on track for the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, but it actually generated more revenue than the original TRZ plan. So what the county is looking at is actually adding 3 additional projects as well that the RMA would be involved in as well. So we're developing all of that now, and in fact, you'll see, hopefully in February, I'll be back to you all with additional contracts between the RMA and the county that would undo some prior work that originally was anticipated with the TRZ activities. It would undo those and implement new agreements towards this new approach. So that's really more of an update than anything else. This has gone before Commissioners Court, and they have approved staff to begin negotiating with the RMA. So in fact, I met with a couple of the county folks yesterday. I anticipate getting an agreement, one or more agreements from them, draft agreements, hopefully next week. So I'm hopeful that by our February board meeting, we'll have action for you all at that time. To implement
I
this new
think it's
approach.
also important to note that originally we were looking at borrowing the money from the SIB. TRZs, it's easier to work through the SIB than the particular financial market. So based on the TRZ, we were going to borrow the money from the SIB with the TRZ as a repayment source. All this has really done is the county is now borrowing the money from the SIB with the development in the area is what they're looking at in terms of additional taxes to be able to fund that fully backstopped by the county itself. So it's really the same process. It's just a matter of who's going to the SIB.
That's absolutely right. Yes, sir. So unless there's questions, I'll move on very briefly to item 12B, procurement process for the selection of an outside audit firm. As you may recall, we use Clifton Larson Allen, who does our annually required annual audit reports for us each year. They've done an excellent job, and in fact, I believe we're in our 4th year with them, if I remember correctly. And as an update on that, we're actually nearing completion of that audit report, and we should have that before the Finance Committee sometime in early February, with the final report coming to the full board for acceptance at our February board meeting. So that's coming soon. However, what we normally will do with our audit services is we'll put that out for procurement each 3, 4, 5 years. So we're at that time now, and this is nothing more than just a note to the board that I'll be putting that out in this coming fiscal year. So the next financial audit will be provided by whoever goes through that procurement process. So just a note, and just to let you know that we'll have that procurement out this year as well. So subject to your questions, that's all I have for you today.
Any questions for Mr. Tejas? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned at 10:08 a.m. on Wednesday, January 14th, 2015. Thank you.